Dr. Catherine Clinton, welcome to the Deep Life.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to dive into some of my favorite topics with you both.
Yeah, we're so excited. I've been looking forward to this for a while. But I guess to get started, could you maybe share a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now?
Absolutely. So I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor here in Oregon, and that journey really took many different turns. I assisted with a traditional indigenous midwife from Mexico, and that sort of opened up the window into alternative healing, natural health. And I got my degree in philosophy. So I had to go back and do all my pre-med stuff. And I went to naturopathic medical school. And in my second year of schooling, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune condition that affects the colon. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, which is another autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid gland. And I was diagnosed with Lyme disease and multiple spirochete infections. It was sort of the second year initiation that happens in medical schools. You have to be there at 7 a.m. If you're a minute late, you don't pass the class and have to take it the next year type of thing, long clinic hours. And I just didn't have the foundation to make that work. So I was diagnosed with all of those things. And I was in a perfect place. I was in this naturopathic medical school. So I was in a perfect place to get all of that healing and modalities that they had to offer. I was right down the hill from an allopathic mainstream medical university, and I was working there doing research on cortisol. And so I had that input as well. And then I was across the river from an acupuncture school. So I really had so much at my fingertips. And I did have to take a break. It allowed me to kind of piece back the physical pieces of my health. And if anyone out there is listening who has chronic disease, they know that getting back to a state of being productive in society is just one layer of health, right? It's important, absolutely, but it sure leaves out a whole spectrum of vitality. And that's where I was. I was able to complete school and see my patients and work in the clinic, but there was definitely a piece of health that I was missing. And I started researching psychoneuroimmunology, which is a fancy word for how our thoughts impact our biology. And reluctantly, I sort of learned, okay, so my thoughts and my reactions and my emotional state do have a very big role in my biology. And that's when I started looking at Martin Picard's work and how emotions impact our mitochondrial function. And that just kind of blew open the doors to quantum biology. And I haven't left the room yet. It's just absolutely fascinating. So that's a little bit about how I got where I am right now.
Amazing. And what if, I mean, just astronomical story to be kind of bombarded with one disease after another to overcome it. I can't wait to dive deep into kind of each of these subjects, but I think most importantly, maybe we can start off with quantum biology and what that is and why it's important. Because in school, now I'm dating myself, I've been out of high school now almost 20 years. Biology was biology. It certainly didn't have anything to do with quantum. So I'd love for you to break that down for us and our listeners.
Absolutely, absolutely. When we think of quantum, it can either feel so intimidating, like there's no way I'm going to understand that, or very mysterious, like it's magic, right? But it makes so much sense once we unwrap it a little bit. So what is quantum biology? It's simply the idea that our biology, our nano-sized, very small level biology, meaning our mitochondrial function, our proteins, how our proteins are interacting, the flow of electrons and protons from the atom and how that influences our health, how photons of light impact our health, how phonons of sound impact our health, how frequency of vibration of music, of thoughts, of emotion, how all of these things can impact the smallest pieces of our biology. And, when we talk about Newtonian physics or Newtonian biology, that's what everyone's learning in school right now. And that's really where mainstream medicine is targeting all of its therapies. And we know it's accepted science that each one of our cells, and we have trillions and trillions of cells, each one of our cells has over 100,000 reactions taking place every single second. And this is not disputed. This is accepted by everyone in the community, but it is impossible with Newtonian biology, with Newtonian physics. And that's where quantum biology comes into play, because at this size, when we're talking about how the electrons flow down the mitochondrial electron transport chain, or how our protons are jump conducting in proteins in our fascia, this is all dealing with quantum phenomenon. So we're talking about quantum entanglement, where two or more particles can become interdependent, even though they're independent and their own individuals, almost like, when you're at a soccer game or a sporting event and there's a wave that happens, right?
Yeah.
So they're all individuals, but they're participating in this collective action. And that's what we're seeing on the smallest scale in our biology. We're seeing quantum entanglement. We're seeing quantum tunneling, where a particle or a system doesn't need to go over an obstacle of, it might be distance, it might be a graded reaction or a chemical gradient that's happening in quantum tunneling. So if we were talking Newtonian physics, like a soccer ball, you would have to kick that soccer ball over the hill hard enough for that ball to get over the hill. When we're talking about quantum tunneling, we're talking about this duality of matter being both matter and physical and a particle, but also a wave of energy. And so that allows whatever it is, a photon of light, an electron, a proton, to quantum tunnel, meaning that it doesn't need to get over that hill. It actually can go straight through that obstacle by traveling multiple paths at one time with quantum superposition. It's absolutely incredible once we start teasing the pieces apart. And that, in a nutshell, is what quantum biology is.
I love it. I am so fascinated. I was not great at school and science and these things, but this isn't what I was taught. Like, I really could listen to you forever. And I think that that's the most encouraging thing, because when Dan and I first started kind of our spiritual journey, if you want to talk about that, it was very spiritual. And I didn't know how to explain exactly what you're explaining kind of scientifically. Like, this is proven, this is peer reviewed. Like, I'm not making this up. You're obviously not making this up. Thank goodness you're on the show to validate some of the things that Dan and I can speak to spiritually. But I think that this is so important to get the message out that it's scientifically proven. There are people out there that just are continuing to learn these new physics, sciences, and medical upgrades, anything and everything, that I very, very much looking to the positive for the future.
Have you been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and struggled to find ways to manage it naturally? Do you suffer from long-term digestive problems and have failed to find answers from mainstream or functional medicine? Are you experiencing long COVID or suspect you may have been adversely affected by products designed to treat or prevent this or other illnesses? The Immune Reset Program, offers a proven track record with unparalleled results for those who suffer from chronic unresolved illnesses. This program is unlike any other, offering a comprehensive deep dive into every aspect of health, the immune system, the gut, and our mindset around healing. It comes with everything you'll need to quickly and permanently resolve challenging illnesses, including all lab work and custom compounded bioactive herbs and supplements in powdered form made just for you, without having to take dozens of pills, capsules, soft gels, or tinctures. Dr. Luke Tera, founder of the Evocentrix wellness programs, offers a free initial consultation to deeply explore your health issues and help you develop a plan to move forward and address your most pressing health concerns today. Our Deep Life listeners will receive an additional month of care, a $3,000 value, absolutely free when you join our program using the Deep Life podcast link. Visit the link in our show notes to access this incredible offer, or go directly to evocentrix.com/deeplife. That is Evocentrix, EVOCentrix.com/deeplife, DEEPLIFE, to find out more and book your free call today.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, I got my undergrad in philosophy.
Yeah.
That was where I was focused. And going back, to be honest with you, I flunked organic chemistry. And when I was taking it over with the same teacher, he said, I don't want to hear what you think the molecules are doing. I want you to put the answer that I want, and then you will pass the class and leave. Like, get out of here. Just tell me the answer that is textbook. And I was from a philosophy degree. I would have these long answers scrawled in there about like the observer effect and how do we know they're jiggling at that in that motion and da-da-da. And he's like, just stop. Just give me the answer I want. Get out of this class. Go on with your life. But it's so true. It's so amazing to have the science starting to validate what we've already always intuitively known. I mean, this is full circle with ancient indigenous knowledge. This is something that they talked about. I'm not aware of any of them using the same terminology as quantum tunneling and this and that, but the ideas are the same. The way they utilized it is absolutely incredible. And so in a beautiful sense, we're coming full circle. I heard someone say the other day, the future is ancient, and it just gave me chills because
I literally just got chills on my back. Yes.
Yeah. And that's really where quantum biology can lend us a hand in coming full circle and having appreciation for some of these things that we weren't able to validate and that Western science cast to the side. Now we're able to kind of walk hand in hand. So it is really exciting.
Yeah, it really is. It seems like it's almost like it's the science is catching up with the ancient wisdom, but it's putting it in a way that like our analytical mind can kind of wrap it around and kind of figure it out. And then it's a little easier to expect the unexpected in a sense, and like understand that your body can do these incredible things. We just like didn't have the language for it or didn't have the background.
Yeah,
science.
absolutely. And then what my goal is to have this trickle up, I guess, to the powers that be and allow them to really incorporate this. And for them to do that, they need the science. They need to be able to see it. They need that proof. And so that's the really exciting thing, because a lot of us don't need that validation, right? We've sensed that intuitively, but to have that at our fingertips and say, okay, now here's the science. Now we demand a different way of doing science, a different way of doing medicine.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Let's get into maybe some of the more practical way. I don't know if practical is the right word, but like people from a day-to-day standpoint, like how is this affecting people who aren't a doctor, if you're or a scientist? Or like how do we see this in the world and relate with it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what I was talking about, the trickle up to
Mm-hmm.
the powers that be. I think that really comes from making this information mostly free, accessible to everybody, so that we can wrap our heads around it and really experience the difference, living in a deeper connection with the world around us, because quantum biology does just that. I mean, if we zoom out of everything, we are just a piece of this magnificent flow of energy that's coming into our system from the universe, from our solar system and beyond, right? Those cosmic rays hitting our ionosphere, which get discharged onto the surface of the earth. It's absolutely amazing. And it kind of dissolves those barriers. Right now, I homeschool my kids, and we're talking about animal classifications and vertebrates and invertebrates and all these different ways of classifying things and learning things. And that's how our mind works. But on a deeper level, if we're able to zoom out, we don't end at the barriers of our skin. We are part of this amazing flow of electrons and photons and protons and recycling of energy. And so when it comes to how would quantum biology make a difference in my life, it's really, I like to boil it down to returning to some of those relationships that modern life has walked us away from. So I can think of three right now: our relationship with the sun, our relationship with the earth, and our relationship with, I call it the wind. And I'll just go through those if you, yeah.
Sure.
So our relationship with the sun, I don't think a lot of people realize that every single cell in our body has a circadian clock, and we are diurnal beings. We are meant to rise with the sun, and we're meant to slow down and go to sleep when the sun sets, right? And so that looks practically like getting up and getting sunlight in the morning before 10 a.m. And what that does with the angle of the sun is that allows us a full spectrum of light, rich in that red light that allows us to set up and initiate a whole hormonal cascade in our body. And it's not just our serotonin and our dopamine that gets dumped when we see that morning sun that gets released into the body. Those serve as nighttime hormones that when we lower the lights, we transform that serotonin into melatonin, our sleep well hormone, our repair hormone. There's this real yin yang kind of relationship there where we need that light and we need that darkness as well. So I really talk with my patients about utilizing that relationship with the sun, getting out an AM sun before 10 a.m. And I'm not talking about looking at the sun. I'm talking about just letting that sun in your eyes, right? It doesn't have to be long as well. 10, 15 minutes, even a couple of minutes sets up that cascade and that alignment in all of those circadian clocks. It regulates our immune system, our inflammatory state, our metabolism, our respiration, our digestion. I mean, everything is set up around this rhythm of the sun. So if we can get a few minutes of sun in the AM, if we can get a few minutes of sun throughout the day, maybe take a call outside, take a break outside, eat your lunch outside, driving with the windows down. I mean, there's so many ways we can sneak it in. And that just kind of also goes to show us how many ways modern life is acting as an obstacle to that relationship with the sun. And then lowering the lights at night, like I said, sets up that whole cascade with melatonin, with our growth hormone. It's really, really important. And I live in Oregon. We have some sunshine right now, but we live in the gray land for months and months out of the year. And that gray, cloudy sky holds that same medicine. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be summertime sun, tropical sun. Natural light is what we're going for. And it also gets really, really dark here, right? So we're in pitch black at 5 o'clock for a couple months in the winter. And we don't turn off the lights all the way. We lower our lights to a more red light spectrum. So we're using incandescent lights, we're using salt lamps. Both my kids have these little non-blue light readers, so they can do little projects and have autonomy over their light source. And so that's what we're doing. We're not walking around in the dark, bumping into each other at 5 o'clock. We are just lowering the light to a spectrum that's more conducive to what we evolved over millennia with, right? So when the sun went down at 5 p.m. here, when there were before modern day life, people were using candles, people were using fire to illuminate. And that is rich in that red and orange spectrum. Again, it's not triggering the inhibition of that melatonin. And that's what we're really concerned about with that rhythm of the sun. And, you know, so many people like to boil it down. How much time and how do I gather it and what do I need to get, right? But really what I want to plant a seed with people listening today is that this is a relationship. And the beautiful thing about it is there are so many physical and mental benefits to aligning our rhythm, our daily rhythm with the sun. But if that's all it is, we're missing out on the beautiful relationship and sense of safety, sense of belonging that we can have by rekindling that relationship with the sun. Feeling that sense of gratitude and that sense of belonging, like I am where I'm supposed to be and it feels really good. That relationship with the sun is, and I would say with all of these things I'm talking about, with earthing, our relationship with the earth, with our relationship with the seasons and the weather, these are relationships. They are not bottles of supplements or something to extract. You know, we can always start there and start to feel the difference in our health and our biology. But after that, there's this cultivating a relationship that brings such a deeper level of vitality, safety, belonging. I often talk about a puzzle, right? We've all put together a puzzle, most of us. And sometimes if we do that multiple times, there's a piece that's kind of frayed. And even though it's in its right spot in the puzzle, it's just not all the way in. It's frayed and kind of in this constant irritation, right? It's constantly irritated because it's not just sinking into its place in the world. And what I'd like to suggest is that looking at these as relationships allows us to do that. It allows us to truly sink into our place in the ecosystem and feel a deep connection and belonging. And I'll extend that to the second thing I really think that people should know about as a practical use of quantum biology is earthing. So coming in contact with the earth. We talked about that amazing flow of energy coming from the universe and the solar system and how it discharges from clouds via lightning strikes onto the surface of the Earth. And that gives us the sea of free electrons. And so our body is able to harness those electrons for biological use. Just a minute or two helps calm our nervous system. After that, we see amazing changes in the circulation of our blood pressure, and maybe we want to get into why that is and structured water. But basically, we're getting a bigger electrical charge on those red blood cells so that they can stay separated and not clumped and flow easier. And the benefits of earthing are just so many. It basically is helping give us energy to use for biological processes. And when we look at the research, we see that it helps decrease pain, it decreases inflammation, it helps our circulatory system and our cardiovascular function, our blood pressure, our blood flow. It helps with wound healing, that conduction of electricity and electrons. And so with all of these things I'm talking about, we can talk about the research and the long list of things, but really it's this beautiful relationship we have with the ecosystem that we belong to. And when we utilize that, everything gets better.
Parenting can be stressful and even overwhelming, especially if you have an overly sensitive child. What if there was a way to better understand, guide, and nurture your child's unique sensitivity and emotional intelligence to set them up for success on their developmental journey? Rooted Rhythm's signature course, Tuned In, offers a transformational process for parents of highly sensitive, super feeling, wise, and empathetic children. You know, Dan and I don't have children of our own, but we were both highly sensitive children growing up. And we know firsthand how difficult it can be to feel and process emotions in a productive and constructive way at such a young age. Recently, having gone through the Tuned In course, we both took away so much valuable information and practical tools we could utilize to reparent ourselves and to understand how to better use our sensitive nature to deepen our connection to ourselves as well as the world around us. The Tuned In course teaches parents concrete skills to meet their sensitive kids' needs in moments of intensity, increases their ability to connect deeply with their children, and supports a process of inner healing to shift how they relate to parenting. Each module offers unique grounding and embodiment meditations, lectures full of both evidence-based and practical content, and supplementary exercises to support in the implementation of new skills. Parents who have taken this course report walking away from the experience feeling relaxed in their being and confident to parent their children in a way that both feels most true to them as a parent as well as most supportive for their children. If this resonates with you as a parent or simply for yourself, we are excited to offer our listeners $100 off of this transformational course. Click the link in our show notes, which goes directly to the Rooted Rhythm Tuned In course website, and enter the discount code DEEP Life, all one word, to receive $100 off of the Tuned In course.
And so a lot of people often ask, like, well, I'm in Manhattan and how can I can't be doing anything like that. There's no patch of grass for me to be on. And my response is that even though those cities are massive and huge and built up, they're still on planet Earth, right? So even though concrete is not as conductive as soil in the earth, it still conducts some of these electrons. So coming in contact with whatever is on top of the earth will be better than not. And it doesn't have to be bare feet on the ground. It can be hands on a tree, right? Those 60s hippies with their tree hugging. they were onto something. It can be that. It can be touching an animal that's connected to the ground. So many different ways that we can utilize that sense of earthing without it being us barefoot out in the beautiful forest type of thing. It's really, we live on planet Earth, so we should be able to access that no matter where we are. And it's a beautiful, again, relationship that once we see that decrease, I mean, you feel it. It really feels like being held by the earth. And it's absolutely incredible. So that would be my second practical tip. And my third practical tip is coming back, returning to that relationship with the wind, which in my mind means the weather and also the negative ions that are in the wind. So many of us are living in this 70-degree life where we don't get hot in the summer and we don't get cold in the winter. And what that's doing is not only do our cells have that circadian 24-hour rhythm aligned with the sun, they also have longer rhythms, seasonal rhythms that are dependent on the seasonal changes in our environment, both the light and the temperature. And so if we can get out in those different seasonal weather patterns, we are able to really induce better mitochondrial function. So if we're talking about cold exposure, so many of us go straight to Wim Hof and ice in the bath and just straight intense cold plunges. But cold exposure can be going for a walk when it's cold outside, right? Allowing yourself to be immersed in that weather. That cold is still going to impact your biology. You're still going to have better flow of electrons through the mitochondrial electron transport chain. You're going to actually create more mitochondria per cell with that winter walk. And same thing in the summer, that infrared heat we get from being hot and sweaty is also doing the same thing. It's building that easy water zone, which maybe we'll get into next. And it's also creating better flow and efficiency of those electrons through the ETC in the mitochondria. And so doing that, getting outside, being exposed to the weather, not only has that seasonal and temperature exposure, but we're exposed to all those negative ions. And those negative ions, a lot of us think of that Leonard effect when water is sheared. So negative ions being very plentiful in places like ocean spray at the beach or waterfall spray, rivers, even rainfall. But a lot of us don't realize that negative ions are produced when the wind flows through plants. So if we are outside and the wind is there, which it usually is, then we are being inundated with this flow of negative ions that our body can use. And again, the research shows that it's very beneficial for our immune system, our inflammatory state, and our mood. And neurological function. We're more creative. We have more neurological plasticity and ability to adapt. So really, those three things are free, they're accessible, anyone can start them today, and that lays the foundation for us to appreciate our biology in a different way, our place in the world in a different way.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was just going to say, everything that you mentioned, we're so on board with and we do all the time, but it's free. You don't, it doesn't cost a dime. I mean, it's really like health can be very accessible no matter what scale your income is. I mean, you can literally walk outside. It also just warms my heart. And I love your gratitude and appreciation for the earth, because I am right there with you. And I feel like it's just been demonized so much, and it's not scary. We are one, like planet, we are earth here. Planet Earth wants to provide for us just as much as it wants us to provide for it. So it's it's so beautiful, and you put it so eloquently. I'm so glad to have this perspective really coming from a doctor, because it isn't always very mainstream. And this is the word that needs to be shouted from the rooftops.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I really think that, if we look at the history of science and medicine, we see that there are a few major paradigm shifts that have happened, and they happen because of this sort of, I don't know why, I've never called it this before, but this trickle up phenomenon. And really what I'm talking about is that grassroots where the
Yeah.
people adopt a new perspective and they pull everyone along with it. And of course, we've seen paradigm shifts try to be enacted by authorities or the church or whatnot, but it isn't until the people really adopt that change that change permeates throughout society. And so that's my hope, is that people really start to access this free relationship we have with the world around us, and that really prompts this change, this paradigm change, because this mechanical model we have in medicine, where you can take something and synthesize it, and it's almost identical, so that should be the same, right? In quantum biology, it's like, oh no. Each element, each atom has its own frequency, it has its own color, it has its own song. It cannot be replaced with something man-made because we think we're smarter than it.
Mhm.
And this is not to knock all pharmaceutical things. As a doctor who works with autoimmune diseases, there's some pharmaceuticals that are really helpful. If I didn't have steroids in my health journey, I would have been really bad off. And so, and of course, though that was a small time in my life that I needed that, there are obvious issues with long-term steroid use, but my point is that quantum biology really allows us to hold each element in its natural state and have respect and reverence for that, so that we're not just so quick to patent the next synthetic version of whatever it is, right? That we are able to have this deeper understanding, because quantum biology doesn't negate Newtonian biology. It says this is the seed from which quantum biology or Newtonian biology comes from. There's a deeper layer. So it's exciting.
It's
Yeah,
so
it
exciting.
really is. It's really empowering.
Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, like our bodies are so intelligent. Like, how does it know how to do all these things? Obviously, there's a power greater than me. Like, I don't know how to clean my cells. I don't know how to grow my hair and my fingernails and detox and all these things, but it's just, that's how fascinating it is. I mean, you've given so many great tips. I know we're running out of time. Maybe let's talk about the easy water really quickly to wrap up, because that's also another, free thing, structured water that people can, practically begin using as soon as they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we're talking about these quantum phenomenons of proton jump conduction in proteins, in that ETC chain in the mitochondria, if we're talking about quantum entanglement, somebody recently last year showed that in the brain, our protons are quantum entangling. And this might be the reason behind consciousness and explain memory and all these things we can't explain with Newtonian biology. When we look at where that's happening, it's happening at the interface of our cells and the water that lines those cells. And so the water that lines those cells is very unique and different than the water that we're drinking. So the water that we're drinking, a lot of us in school kind of learned that Mickey Mouse picture where we've got the big oxygen and the two little Mickey Mouse ear hydrogens. And so when we're drinking a glass of water, we're just guzzling a bunch of Mickey Mouse heads, H2O, down the hatch. And that's really a misnomer. Those hydrogens are constantly dancing in water. It is very, very dynamic. And what researchers have found, Gerald Pollack and his team out of the University of Washington was the first to identify this fourth phase of water, something he termed the exclusion zone of water. And people are calling it cell-bound water, structured water, because it's different than that bulk H2O. It's actually H3O2. And it starts to form on our hydrophilic surfaces, our cell membranes, our fascia, our mitochondria, our vessels, lymphatic vessels, our blood vessels, our fascia, collagen tubules. And what happens is this structured water, the hydrogens are more tightly bound. And so it looks like a hexagonal lattice, like a honeycomb, right? Those bees are so smart. And so as one sheet of structured water forms of these hexagonal honeycomb shapes, it acts as a template for another sheet to build and another sheet to build and another sheet to build. And if we have any math-minded people out there, you'll notice that we're missing a hydrogen. It didn't go from H2O to H4O2. It went from H2O to H3O2. So as that structured water forms, it kicks out a proton, a hydrogen, a positively charged hydrogen that forms just outside the structured water. So we have that structured water building against our cell surface. And then immediately after that is the positively charged, what researchers are calling a proton wire, a water wire, a proton zone, a water zone. And what Pollack did was he put an electrode in this negatively charged structured water that's forming against our cells and tissues, and that proton zone, that positively charged zone. And just like a 9-volt battery, he found that that separation of charge was enough to light a light bulb. The video is absolutely, gives me chills. And this is what allows for our bodies to propel water and protons throughout the body. So Pollack did a beautiful study where he recreated a collagen tubule. He added infrared light into the experiment. He put the tubule down in water, and he saw that that structured water formed on the outside and the inside of the tubule. That was amazing. But what was more was he found that that separation of charge between the negative structured water and the positively charged proton zone was enough to power the flow of water and protons throughout that tube. And what we're seeing in the research is that this different stage of water, this structured water within our body, is quite possibly the interface where these quantum biological phenomenons are happening, because the structured water can capture that energy from a photon of light, from a phonon of sound, from frequency information. There's beautiful research out there showing that proteins, and Bruce Lipton, for those of you who don't know, Bruce Lipton wrote The Biology of Belief, and in that he really taught us that it's not the nucleus of the cell that's acting as the brain, it's the proteins embedded in the cell membrane that really dictate what that cell is going to do. And decades later, there was research showing that the structured water that surrounds the proteins can pick up resonant frequencies from other proteins, and it changes their shape, thus initiating biological action. And so to say that in a different way, you kind of have like two tuning forks communicating with each other. And so you have a tuning fork of a certain frequency, and it's rung, and that frequency is traveling around, and that second tuning fork picks up on that frequency almost instantaneously, and they vibrate in unison. The same mechanism is happening with our proteins via that structured water that lines them, so that one protein can resonate at a certain frequency, and the proteins that are meant to resonate at that frequency do, and change conformation and create some kind of action in the body. It's absolutely amazing. And to tell you the truth, what people ask next is, well, how do I get that structured water in me?
Oh.
It's just like everyone. And there's structured watering devices have done a wonderful job with marketing, because a lot of people think structured water is just the water we drink. And it's not. There's structured water being formed in our body. Now, we can take a regular glass of tap water, which is not my favorite. It's got a ton of pollutants in there. But we can take a glass of water and we can add energy into that water. And researchers like Gilbert Ling, Albert St. Georgi, Emilio Del Guiche really highlighted that when we add energy into that water, some of it is turned into a coherent domain or a more excited form of water. And there's lots of research out there showing that this type of water, this more energized, more coherent, more structured, is beneficial to plant growth. It's been shown in agricultural studies, in animal studies, and in human studies as well. And so, the idea is that those hydrogens, instead of creating that lattice form against a hydrophilic surface, they're kind of holding hands and creating a circle. And that circle keeps everything out except electromagnetic frequency, so that we are able to add energy into our water, and that energy helps with our biology. And so when we're talking about building structured water, that lattice sheet inside of our body, or those little circles in the water that we're drinking, it looks like the same thing. We can add and structure our drinking water or the water in our body by adding energy into it. Infrared energy from the sun, infrared energy from moving creates that structured water in our body. Moving our glass of water in a vortexing formation also helps create more excited domains of water, more coherent domains of water, more structured water in our drinking water. So we've got infrared energy, we've got the infrared energy of motion. Spring water is naturally structured because of the natural flow of that vortex spring water. What else can do it? There's been research showing that teas, probiotics, coconut water, the water that is within plants and vegetables and fruits, when we eat those are all helping structure the water that we're drinking. And so they're two different things, but they go by the same principles. Adding energy into the water, whether that's the water within our body or whether that's the water we're drinking, helps create more energy for our body to use. Another one a lot of people don't think about is intention and thoughts. That has the ability to structure the water within us as well as the water that we're drinking. That energy input is what's structuring the water. And it's such a key component when we're looking at quantum biology and how all these beautiful things are taking place. It looks like they're happening all within that structured water. So it's exciting.
It really is. And it's also something that, like, as Dan said before, it's empowering. We're able to, have a little bit of control on how we drink the water, where we put it, what we're doing with it, what we're eating, structuring it. It's just, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
I mean, you have given so much fabulous information to our listeners that I think that, you could pay you $1 million for what you just said, but giving us free stuff to do, It's fabulously wonderful. Thank you for providing this. It's, like I said, an honor to have you on the show. You know, if people want to either read more about your work or, you know, just dive into more of your philosophies and how you practice, is there a website or anything that we can direct our listeners to get more information?
Absolutely. So I love sharing this information, and I'm Dr. Catherine Clinton everywhere. So my website is drcatherineclinton.com. That's my handle on Instagram and Facebook. And I just share a ton of information. I have courses and I have a book coming out in January, but I can't help myself. I'm always giving away this information because that's what I want. I want that grassroots demand for a different paradigm. And we get there by continuing this conversation. So thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to talk with you, and I look forward to just continuing this conversation.
Absolutely, us too. Thank you, Dr. Catherine, for all that you've provided for us today.
Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to the next time.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for listening.